Hi, everyone, and welcome to the December Supper Club. We're filming the week of Thanksgiving, and so we want to wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving week. And as you know, we are going through a series. Our series this season is called Reimagining Well-Being, and it's based on the adult education series that Dr. Jason Whitehead just completed. So in November, we looked at the word reimagining and imagination. And this month, we're looking at the word well-being and just kind of taking a bigger picture view. And then the following months, we'll dive a little deeper into those subjects. So we'll do a little bit of context setting for you right now. One thing to keep in mind is that we're thinking of well-being in a different way than you might think about the word happiness, because you can define these things in so many different ways. But happiness, if you thought about that, is more of a transient mood, something that changes more quickly. Well-being is something that's more stable, more of a state or a stage than a state, as if happiness is a state of being. And it looks more comprehensively, more holistically at not just your physical well-being, but your spiritual, emotional, mental, different aspects of who you are.
Right. And why do we talk about this as Christians, as believers in a community of faith? We believe that God has created us to be people that are whole and healthy and well. And our scripture talks about Jesus saying, consider the lilies, the lilies of the field, and that Jesus came to give us life abundantly. And so there's an aspect of God's will for us to flourish and be healthy and whole. And Jason reminded us of the shorter catechism that said, what is the chief end of humanity? And it's to glorify God and enjoy God forever. So this aspect that life should be good and whole and healthy, and that there's a joy in it.
As well, to be God's instruments in the world, it requires, but it certainly is benefited by our well-being. If we're in a good place in these different areas that we're going to talk about, we're better able to be that vessel, that servant for God in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. We discovered what's called the Human Flourishing program at Harvard University. And they've been working on this program, Human Flourishing, for 5 years. And they identify 6 categories, or what they call dominions of well-being, so that influence the wholeness that we seek. And here are the 6. Happiness and life situation, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close social relationships, and financial and material security. So all those contribute to the way that we have aspects of our lives that contribute to our well-being.
And if you think about specifically the pandemic and how that has impacted those different categories, it's been enormous. It was so disruptive to our job situations, having to figure out new ways of doing work, whether it's the classic Zoom calls or finding childcare in different ways, or being home with kids that aren't in school anymore. Financial challenges, people actually getting sick from the virus. And so if you think about all of the strains that created, how challenging that was on those categories in so many different ways.
Absolutely, and for some people more in some than others, but all of us at some level, all these dimensions have impacted our lives and our health, our well-being. And so the question of how to renegotiate those at this point as we continue to engage with the pandemic and move forward with the pandemic.
Well, and the paradox, too, to say the other side of it, that the pandemic also gave us, some of us more than others, the time or the space or even the challenges of the isolation to reflect and clarify our values.
Right.
So it was a paradox. We were both challenged in our well-being, but I think some of us were able to clarify some things that have led to stronger well-being, at least in some ways.
In priorities in our lives. We know about, and we've talked about the great resignation that is taking place in the United States, and I think that's reflective of this conversation about a clarification of priorities.
Right. One of the things that Jason talked a lot about was being adaptable or adoptable, being able to move in new directions given the pandemic. I know for myself, especially at the beginning, it was, well, this disruption has happened and we'll get back to normal.
Right.
And we all talk now about a new normal and what things have changed that aren't coming back. What opportunities are there that weren't there before, and how do we think about our world differently? We think about church differently. How do we think about worship in new ways?
Right.
So that adaptability is a really important piece of all this. Not to get stuck.
He talked about that our values stay the same, that what we hold dear, but that they have to flex in response to new information and new life circumstances, and that makes sense to me. That resonates.
And it's especially helpful to do that in community.
Yes.
And it's harder when we're by ourselves and we don't have others to work these things out with.
Right.
And so to do a commercial for the church, so to speak, because we just read an article this week about the importance or the value of church as a place that benefits well-being, because it hits so many of those categories.
That's right. So many of those categories or religious communities for all of us. And it's more than just your private spiritual practices is what this author argues. It's which are important, your prayer practices, your spiritual disciplines. It's more than just your private, that it's the web of connection and the support systems that we receive, again, like you said, in those 6 areas, that a community of faith really hits those areas and are necessary.
How many of them it hits? Being together in a community hits the social, and we make lots of strong social connections, as you say, that neighborhood of care that you used in your sermon this week that I liked. But also, obviously the spiritual, we hope, gets hit. Right. The mental and the kind of being challenged intellectually by new ideas and new ways of being. Right. But if you were having financial trouble, that neighborhood of care is there for you.
That's right.
And that the church can be here to help you through those times. That's an enormous benefit to well-being. Just knowing it's there, even if you never needed it. That's right. That the social, the network or the web of support is there. Yeah. So, I like that. More than a health club. Right? More than your gym. I mean, that's connection, but it's not the same. Right. If we would just stand up and do calisthenics during church, we would get all the categories covered. You'd be set. So think about those, and as you talk to your groups, we have an idea of how to spend the evening. So here's the idea. Take a few minutes and think about those 6 categories, and maybe we'll list them for you one more time. That's good. And let one rise to the top, and it might surprise you. I think that this is a chance to do a little bit of discernment or trusting that God is leading you. It might not be the one you immediately think of, but see if one kind of bubbles to the top as having some energy for you, right? And then each of you can share a little bit about why that's maybe has some energy. An area that what you want to look at. Right. Yep. The area you want to look at, and then invite some feedback from the folks at your supper club around that area for you. So just talk about it, each of you a little bit. So why don't we give them again, just so if they want to write them down, or maybe we'll put them in the... I think we put them in the email, and they'll be in there. Okay. So we encourage you to share these ideas and use them as a way of looking at reimagining your life as you go forward and reintegrating well-being into your wholeness. And then just to look ahead in the next few weeks, we'll go into some of those categories like Jason did and had guests speaking each month. Each month we'll have one. We'll look at an area. Okay. All right. We wish you well. Okay. Bye-bye.